Have you ever felt like, you've done absolutely everything right? You got the education, you landed the job, you work incredibly hard, you get the promotions, and yet somehow you're still trapped living paycheck to paycheck. Look, if you're feeling intensely frustrated because it feels literally impossible to get ahead no matter what you do, you are definitely not alone. So, why is that happening? Well, today's explainer breaks down a really fascinating analysis by entrepreneur Tom Bilyeu on exactly why the American dream feels basically dead for so many of us right now. We're going to look at the modern economy almost like a crime scene, and we're tracking down this invisible force that's quietly and entirely legally draining your wealth. Let's look at our primary suspect. The source argues that we need to totally redefine our understanding of inflation. It's not just prices going up like it's some natural law of the universe. No, instead, this analysis defines inflation as government-approved counterfeiting. It's effectively a hidden tax. Basically, it's a systemic operation where governments print money out of thin air to pay for massive expenses and promises without having to do the highly unpopular thing of actually raising your taxes. Okay, let's look at exactly how that counterfeiting hurts you on a daily basis. Imagine you have a mug of really strong coffee. That represents the value of the dollars currently in the economy. Now imagine pouring a massive tsunami of tap water right into that single mug. Every drop of water you add dilutes that coffee until you literally can't even taste it anymore, right? Well, printing money works exactly the same way. It fundamentally destroys the purchasing power of every single dollar you already hold in your pocket. So why do governments do this? Well, politicians are in the business of getting reelected, and throughout history, promising free stuff has been the absolute ultimate way to win votes. But as the source points out, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The dirty secret is that through money printing, they can essentially force your shrinking purchasing power to quietly foot the bill for all those promises. Let's use a bit more of a visceral analogy to see how this whole thing builds. Imagine a really rich friend throws a lavish, completely free party in your honor. Sounds amazing, right? But during the party, a hacker silently breaks into your bank account and drains your funds to pay for the enormous catering tab. That's the vibe here. The government doesn't directly steal your money, they counterfeit it. And that counterfeiting silently steals what your money can actually buy without ever asking for your permission. Now, you might be thinking, hold on, isn't inflation only targeted at around 2%? Why should I panic? Well, the answer is the brutal math of compounding interest. According to Trueflation data cited in our source, the real compounded rate of inflation over just the last 5 years alone was actually over 25%. Think about that. A quarter of your purchasing power just gone. And this brings us to a totally crucial mindset shift. We have to stop looking at nominal bank balances and start anchoring to real purchasing power. Sure, your bank account might stubbornly say you have $100, but after compounding inflation, that nominal $100, it only buys about $80 worth of real goods. This source strongly urges us to benchmark our real wealth against the true cost of vital resources, things like energy and oil, to see what we actually have. And for anyone claiming that money printing isn't the root cause here, the source points to a truly staggering data point. There is a 0.9 correlation between printing money and inflation. Just to put that into perspective, a 1.0 would be a perfect absolute match. We are literally just 1/10 of a point away from perfection. It's the undeniable smoking gun. More money injected into the system equals higher prices. That money goes. The way our financial system is currently designed actually acts like a massive funnel, legally transferring wealth away from the poor and middle class and directly into the pockets of the ultra-rich. Let's look at the really tragic contrast this system creates. On one side, you have the responsible saver. They put their cash in the bank, only to watch its purchasing power slowly evaporate. But on the other side, you have the asset holder. When the government floods the system with diluted money, the prices of finite assets artificially inflate to absorb those new dollars. So the asset holder's net worth skyrockets, while the saver just sinks. And that right there reveals rule number one of surviving the modern economy. You absolutely must own assets. The crazy part is, the ultra-rich don't even need to be corrupt to win this game. They just hire smart money managers who tell them to buy finite things that will stubbornly hold their value as the dollar gets progressively weaker and weaker. What's more, this inflationary environment actually heavily rewards taking on massive debt, which sounds crazy, right? But if you know dollars are going down in value, borrowing 20 grand today means you're paying it back with drastically weaker dollars in the future. Savvy investors aggressively use debt as leverage to buy appreciating assets. Their returns end up far outpacing inflation, meaning they actively get wealthier using borrowed money, while average citizens get absolutely crushed just trying to save. Okay, so now that we've examined the crime scene, here is your personal playbook to escape this seemingly rigged financial system and actually protect the fruits of your hard labor. The explainer lists 5 major asset classes to use as an impenetrable shield against the endless printing of fiat money forever. We're talking short-term U.S. treasuries for low-arm risk, stocks and index funds, Bitcoin, real estate, and finally, investing in your own business. Holding these specific assets is basically how you build a fortress around your purchasing power. Now, notice the truly unique role of Bitcoin here. Unlike gold, which actually still inflates by about 2% a year as more is mined, Bitcoin is mathematically designed to be truly non-inflationary sound money. According to the source, its primary purpose is to mathematically stop the government from abusing their counterfeiting privilege to just reach into your pocket. It's a hard cap. The source also offers a somewhat controversial but absolutely vital take on the stock market. You kind of have to understand that investing in stocks is essentially gambling. Public stocks aren't always priced on fundamentals. They're heavily priced on human sentiment and speculation. But because of the inflation heist we've been discussing, taking on this risk and gambling on assets has become an absolute necessity, just to survive and maintain your wealth. You kind of have to play the game. So what happens if we just keep printing money forever? Well, the historical endgame is pretty dark. Endless money printing leads to extreme debt accumulation until that debt becomes mathematically impossible to service. Historically, this triggers what's called a debt jubilee, which is a massive, often chaotic, and sometimes violent restructuring of debt, where huge amounts of wealth are wiped out, and societal unrest usually follows. So we're left with a really stark choice at the end of this debt cycle: pain versus productivity. On one hand, we have the incredibly painful historical outcome of hyperinflation and conflict. But on the other hand, there is a grand hope for a peaceful exit. And that exit relies entirely on a massive, unprecedented explosion of technological productivity. Our ultimate hope for that peaceful exit relies entirely on innovation. Think about it. If we can leverage artificial intelligence to drive the cost of energy and labor towards zero while aggressively deregulating the market, we could theoretically grow the economy at 4 to 5%. That surge in productivity could actually outpace the crushing debt. It would lower the cost of living and potentially save the entire system without the need for a devastating collapse. It's an incredible thought. So look, yes, the economic game as it's currently structured is heavily rigged. Inflation is a hidden tax that is actively draining your wealth. But now that you actually understand how the machine works, you have a choice. Are you going to sit by as a victim of the great wealth heist, just holding depreciating dollars? Or will you immediately shift your mindset, acquire assets, and play to win? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.